Hello and welcome to this edition of the Scoop Podcast. My name is Chris Edwards. I'll be your director of fun and games for this edition. Before we get to our program, we have three sponsors of our season 2 of the Scoop Podcast. I want to give a shout out to Unity Bank, Techie Geek, and our third sponsor. I don't have to give a shout out to because that's going to be our theme for the podcast today. Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital, Somerset. Today, I think we have a very interesting podcast because I think we're blending where health and industry and business come together. And I think since the pandemic, really that was kind of, I think, such an eye-opening point for the business community on why health is such a big factor for a healthy business, right? Healthy employees equal a healthy business. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Ragui Sadek he's the founder and director of the bariatric surgery program at RWJ Barnabas Health. Thanks for joining us, doctor.
Thank you, Chris. Pleasure to be here.
No, the pleasure is all mine. I know you have a very busy schedule, and I want to get into the business side. But before we do that, I wanted to talk really about your origin story. I know you've started studying in Egypt before you came over to the United States. Where did your interest in health start? Can you talk a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So growing up, my dad was an ophthalmologist, a surgeon. And growing up, he used to take me around when he to his office. I would see him, do medicine and take care of patients. And back in Egypt, he used to do like minor procedures in his office, and I would just peek through and see all that. And the conversations about medicine started at a very young age. And, it almost felt like it was a given that I was going to follow in his footsteps. And initially, that was my plan, to continue being in medicine and become an ophthalmologist. I was able to get into medical school at age 15. I turned 16, wow. First year of medical school. And graduated medical school in Egypt at age 22, doing procedures and that. And then my dad, we talked, and where do you want to continue? And I figured, I had a lot of family in the United States, so I came here to finish my study and continue in the same footsteps. The relationships led to Staten Island University Hospital, where I was doing surgical research there. And I started to get closer to the surgical department in general. And then all of a sudden, my interest and my love for medicine changed or took a different direction when surgery became everything I wanted to do. And surgery in general just goes more beyond what everybody thinks, cutting and sewing and plumbing and all that stuff. Because at some point in time, on any given moment in the middle of the night, that surgical resident or an attending is the only person in the hospital that can actually save an emergency.
Right. Yeah.
And I saw that growing up, and that was it for me. Then I got very lucky because in the early 2000, laparoscopic surgery was taken off, and it was becoming the main, procedure that we do, and I was trained with one of the best probably in the world at that time, and that's it. I became a laparoscopic surgeon.
What I feel like from 20 years ago, right, almost, the technology in those types of procedures, I would assume all minimally invasive procedures, has drastically changed. Can you talk just a little bit about when you started, studying to where things are now?
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly it advanced. And if you notice, a lot of medicine, technology takes time to catch up, and procedures take time to catch up and evolve in what they are. But in laparoscopy, it took off so quickly because it was just such an amazing change from what we used to do. So instead of a patient coming in to get a procedure done and staying in the hospital for 4 or 5 days with pain and potential pneumonias and wound and incisions and all that stuff, all of a sudden patients were coming in, getting a procedure done, and leaving in 1 day.
Wow.
And we just couldn't get enough of it. And we wanted more. We wanted so much more. Technology took a while to catch up to what we wanted as surgeons. So, for example, you get a gallbladder removed in the 80s. big incision under the rib cage, severe pain, patients in the hospital for days. Now you could do this laparoscopic and they go home the same day, and you're like, this is an amazing improvement. We really changed people's lives and their post-op just through laparoscopy, and it's such a tremendous change. And I can't even say enough about how this changed what surgery is.
Yeah, yeah.
But companies had to catch up to what we wanted, and technology and stapling techniques and energy techniques and all that, and devices were still behind, and it took them a while to catch up to where we are today, where we could do all this robotically.
I was going to say I'm probably skipping a little ahead to the future of the industry, but how have robotics kind of crept into the operating room?
Right now, robotics there are some reports that it's about 60 to 70% penetration into into surgical procedures, because it's not just the robot that offers you dexterity, movements. Surgeons basically sitting on a console rather than actually standing, by the patient, so it helps from a stress standpoint and all that. But on top of this, there's 3D imaging that you can see. Which in laparoscopy, conventional laparoscopy, it's a 2D image, so that gives you more depth perception when you're operating. But more than that, technology with the AI, revolution. Now imagine we're including AI into these robots, and now you're getting so much more data about what's going on.
Yeah,
hand movements, techniques, tissue strength. It helps us tremendously.
I joke here with my team that we think we're on the cutting edge of AI here when we're using Copilot and programs like that to enhance our flyers or help our website. And I'm like, I think there's a better use for this out there, and I think you're in the world that's probably in the better use than what we're doing with it.
Yeah, it's amazing what we're doing right now and what's actually what the potential are.
Yep.
There are different robots now in the market. It's not just one company now. There are like 3 or 4 companies out there. There are companies in Europe, and what they can do using AI technology and analyzing. So AI is not going to just operate. There are some people who say that these are going to do the surgery by themselves. I don't agree with that. I think that's not going to happen. As a human being, you always want a human being in the room, especially if you're going to sleep. And you know what I mean? That's because I play a lot of sports. I've been on the other side of it, and I had sports injuries and surgeries, so I know how it feels. And I want a human.
Yes.
I'm not gonna go to sleep to a machine. I'm sorry.
No, I think about my loved ones. There's absolutely no way, right?
Exactly. Yep. But the technology can help surgeons understand so much about the tension and Again, and this can take an hour to talk about, but recovery depends on what we do. So think of surgery as a trauma. So the less trauma to the body, the faster the body will recover. So our goal as surgeons now in the 21st century, surgeons should be thinking about how can I traumatize the body less? How can everything I do has to be at a minimal level? As a matter of fact, I tell my team, there are a few surgeons who work under me. We're about a group of 8 or 9 surgeons, and even for fellows and residents, the same teaching. I want you to think about going in and going out as efficient and as be as a minimalist, as much of a minimalist as you can, to decrease the trauma on the human body, which translates into faster recovery.
Right.
And that's what we want.
Yeah. We're talking, maybe 5-day stay in the hospital versus 1 day. It's an 80%, enhancement, right? So it's got to be as efficient as possible. You not only, you're into the world of surgery, but you were really a pioneer from a bariatric surgery. Can you talk about how you started your what hole did you see in the marketplace in the bariatric world, and how did you come into starting your own practice and then your relationship with RWJ as well?
Yeah, so for bariatric surgery, there, we all, the data remains the same. We were only operating, and we're still operating on 1% of patients.
Yeah.
that deserve to get an operation or need to be treated for obesity. Obesity is a worldwide pandemic. You alluded to this earlier when you talked about the COVID and the pandemic, and a lot of the data came out showing that most patients that ended up in an intensive care unit in England, for example, were morbid obese.
Right.
A lot of the complications were related to severe obesity. So we understood even through the pandemic, which we knew before, but it was very clear during the pandemic time that when you're overweight or obese or unhealthy in any way, any of these pandemics can lead to more complications and harder recovery. But we still operate on 1% of people. And where do the rest, the rest are not getting treatment, the rest of the patients. And, there's so many studies why lack of education on our end, we're not educating the public enough, lack of access, insurance issues, fear of surgery.
Right.
So in the early 2000, again, laparoscopy was taken off, minimally invasive, and we were doing every procedure. And in about 2004, during my fellowship, we started, to say, okay, well, it's time to do these procedures laparoscopic. Before that, these procedures were done open, and the complication rates were just through the roof.
Right.
And we said, let's try to do this laparoscopic because this is just not, it's not beneficial to the patient if we get a 30% complication rate. But technology was not where we wanted it to be. So it took a while for these two to match technology and what we can do till, the middle of 2000, around that time when we were doing all bariatric surgery laparoscopic. And it was also the time when I graduated, my fellowship, and I started working in private practice, and I saw the effect of that. And it's one of these operations that a patient will come to you and say these words, "You have changed my life."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's an amazing feeling.
All right. Right.
So I decided that that's something I want to do. And besides doing other minimally invasive procedures as well, like for acid reflux and, the gallbladders and hernias and all that, bariatric surgery was basically 70% of my practice at the time.
That's I always love a good an origin story from a business perspective, and I kind of want you to put your CEO hat on. As you're kind of growing this at the beginning, how do you balance all the different hats you had to wear during that time period?
It wasn't easy. You spend a lot of time at work. You have to balance that with family life as well, which also, to me, was very important. My kids were growing. I was coaching my son's soccer team, and I had to also find time for that. But there was something very important, and one of the things that I've decided early on in my career is that I wasn't going to bring my work home, and I wasn't going to take my kids' time away and give it to work. These were the two things, or my wife, obviously. And these were the first things. So if I had to go to work early or work during lunch or juggle different meetings with patients, I just had to do it because I wouldn't encroach on my family time. That was the first thing. And having a good team around you is really key to having success as a CEO of any business.
Absolutely.
And especially healthcare. And I was lucky that I have a great, practice office business manager who really can help me with the time management and all that. But I always say one thing very, very important. You have to have a good product, which is my skill, what I do.
Right.
And then everything else has to be built around it.
Right.
And you have to have a vision. And I always had a rule, like when I'm turning away patients, it's time to expand.
Right.
When I see that a lot of patients are coming from different locations, it's time to open an office or a place in that area. When my front desk girls cannot answer enough phones, it's time to hire more front desks.
Right.
So that was always my tipping, point for expanding my business. And also, I always believed in one thing very important. What I tell you, my word is a contract, and I wanted this to be understood across the industry. So if I tell you I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. I always think, we do a lot of programs here at the partnership on marketing and communications for businesses. And always, we try to, we're like forensic marketers sometimes because we try to get a business to kind of unwind itself down to its core. And you hit the nail on the head in terms of, it's got to be a vision and a mission that aligns from the top down, right? So you establish that, and then you had to go out and find a team in place who kind of carried that through. Any kind of lessons or anything along the way as you were building out the practice that kind of really sticks out in your mind?
I was always one of the team. I was never the boss.
Right.
Until this day, I am not the boss. I mean, I walk in, I have, like I said, there are 9 board-certified, full-blown, top-notch surgeons that each and every one of them can run a program by themselves. That's how good they are.
Right.
So I never treated them as if I'm their boss and I tell them what to do. And, to a certain extent, I give advice, the gray hair advice and the 20 years of being a surgeon advice. That's really what my role is. But I never... Basically, it's not like I come in, I operate first, and then I leave, and then they last behind. I'm always there. I'm the first person to come in. I'm the last person to leave. I'm always involved in day-to-day, interactions. I'm always giving advice for clinical matters. If there's a problem that in managing a patient, I always get involved and put my experience. I always try to, use all my, communication skills to communicate on their behalf. Either with a hospital or administration, or even just to give them advice in every, aspect of medicine.
Right,
so
right.
I think the biggest advice I would give to anyone who wants to run a business, or run a team, is to be part of the team.
All right. Yep.
And lead from being part of the team. And I think if everyone buys into the team mentality, truly do,
Right.
then you'll be successful because they'll give 100%.
Yeah. I always the words of Simon Sinek, who's a renowned leadership coach, always rings true with me in terms of usually in the business world, you get promoted or work your way up through being good at your craft, but then you get thrown into a leadership position with no training, and also a lot of times you're not expected to keep doing that craft. And I always found the really effective leaders are still in the business, not trying to just copy and paste what you had done to your team as well. The last part I wanted to, tie everything into our partnership with RWJ. Can you talk about that relationship, when that partnership started and how that operates? Obviously, we have a lot of listeners who are part of the RWJ system, whether that's just through general, family health or whatever it might be. Can you talk about that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, and the relationship with us and RWJ has been really fantastic and very rare to find between such, as a private group and the hospital. But we've always been very loyal to the system and to the hospital. And RWJ, in return, have always been a great partner and a team player, and always we always sat together, figure out what's the best way that we can provide quality service. So that the 3 things that we don't compromise: quality, ethical, surgical standards, and always be available for our patients. And we never compromise on that. And I think, and as RWJ and as the system is very smart in spotting talent and spotting, great surgical and ethical behavior,
Right.
they really were instrumental in forging this partnership. And now we, as a group, we are building surgical and advanced surgical programs across the system. So in RWJ Somerset is a great hospital. I've always had relationships and ties to the hospital. I used to operate, I still operate, and I've started operating there since the initial, merger between RWJ and Somerset Hospital. So I know everybody. Operating room's top notch. People are just literally bending over backwards to provide a great service. So what does a doctor want? That's what
Exactly.
the doctor wants, right?
Yep.
Top operating room. Everything that you want is there, and people making things easy so you can do what you do best. And what we do best is go in, take care of patients.
Nope. I think
out.
the reputation the hospital has is light years from the old Somerset Medical Center. And I think, I've seen that. I have 2 young kids, and now when we go and see specialists or anything like that, they're referring, to RWJ Somerset. My youngest son was born there. And it's great to hear kind of that same similar story from your end. We're going to put your information up on the screen here, or linked out with the podcast. But how would someone who has a family member, a friend who's been thinking about anywhere? I know you mentioned just beyond just bariatric, but thinking about minimally invasive surgical procedures. How would they get in touch with you?
We're available online, so our website is www.bariatricsnj.com. We have the phone number, which is 732-640-5316. We have an office on the hospital on 30 Rihill Avenue, where we see patients there for any surgical procedure needed. And also they can email us, info@advancedsab.com.
Great. Well, I think that's knowing, we say this a lot with our financial institutions that, you drive down Route 22, a lot of the banks don't need those branches anymore, but their people want to know that they're banking in their backyard. And I also think that is the same in health too, that people want to know that, they don't have to go to New York City or Philadelphia for state-of-the-art procedures. So, Dr. Sadek, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of the Scoop podcast. And until we upload again.
Thank you.
Perfect. 23 minutes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Everyone, I kind of wish I had.